No, but the plane was a little bit late. Where did you fly from? London? Was it? Was a strike in Manchester?
We had to fly from Liverpool because there's a strike in Manchester, and it took a very long time because there was some fault with the plane. But we did get here eventually.
Some fault with the plane?
Yes.
Did that scare you?
It did scare me because I don't like to fly, and when they said, you know, we have to get some engineers on board to fix the plane, it sounded a bit silly.
Yeah.
But generally I hate to fly anywhere. If I can avoid it, I'll never do it.
Well, we were just saying there earlier on that the Smiths have been in the programme many times over the last few years, in particular Johnny Marr, and you've never actually been with us live in the programme before, so it was, I think, this time last year, February last year, when Johnny and Andy were in. Now, it was a strange one because you played 3 Irish dates in February. You played Dublin, Dundalk and Belfast.
That's right.
And something happened at one of those gigs to make Andy leave the band.
After the gigs, when we returned to England, it was not really the gigs because of the gigs here. It was when we got back to England, he was quite ill and personally had lots of personal mix-up. So he really had to leave and straighten himself out.
And whose idea was it to bring in Craig Gannon from
It was Johnny's idea. Johnny knew Craig quite vaguely. Nobody else did, but initially it seemed to work really, really well. Obviously, in the long run, as we know now, it didn't work very well. Craig wasn't really terribly interested. In a nutshell, really. We had to force him to turn up to studio work, and we had to force him to come to rehearsals and so on.
It sounds pretty strange if Johnny thought he was good initially.
Well, I suppose initially he showed a side of him that wasn't really his natural way. And so eventually, when we toured America, which was a very long time, you get to know people very, very well, and all came forth, as it were.
Well, America was the Smiths as a 5-piece then, and now it's back to a 4-piece.
That's right,
because Andy's back in the fold. So let's take it then, like 1987, February the 11th, it's now, whatever, Wednesday. So, like, how's everything going with the Smiths? I mean, like, it looks as though you're in a really good position at the moment.
I think we are. I think that the last stretch really has been the best time ever in every way, recording-wise, and we do feel a great sense of power, which is good.
Well, if I can refer then to the last stretch, as you call it, as say, to the last 6 or 8 months, what about the previous 6 months? Now, they weren't happy at all.
No, they were extremely unhappy. I mean, people may not know, but we had serious battles with the record company. We were in court, and we were this, and we were that, and we were being sued for every conceivable movement we had ever done. So it was really very depressing, and we didn't really win the whole thing. There was just a settlement, which it made it probably even worse, I suppose, because there was so much money involved and so many bills to pay at the end of the whole thing. I mean, The Queen is Dead was finished a long, long time before Rough Trade would allow it to be released. So we were slightly annoyed about that.
And even as the Smiths being as big as they were in Rough Trade, they could hold that for 6 or 8 months, and they could even stop you doing things with the Smiths almost.
Well, yes, but everything else, yes, they can do that, but there are drawbacks for Rough Trade, because when they do that, everything else in the building also stops, because nobody can release records until the Smiths have released their records, because Rough Trade relies so heavily on Smiths' income for every other group that they have, that it was really actually a very bad situation for Rough Trade also.
Well, was it a bad situation for the Smiths individually? I mean, like, for instance, like Johnny Marr was saying, like, I go into the studio every day for 3 hours, and suddenly I wasn't allowed to do that. I was lost. I was like out of a job.
No, it was very odd, very, very odd. But most of the days I spent with lawyers and with people from the record company trying to settle certain things. And it went on for so long, 6 months, 7 months, that it became purgatory. And I didn't think really that any vaguely strong group could really live through it. It was so personally damaging and awful in every way that I think it would have crushed a lesser resilient group. But the fact that we came through it, and quite proudly also, and then had a very good stretch towards the end of the year, was, I think, a great triumph.
Well, besides the delaying of the album during that period, there was talk that the Smiths were whinging quite a bit about the fact that a lot of the singles you released weren't doing as well as they should have. For instance, now last year you released 4 singles, all of which were very successful, incidentally, but I mean, at the same time, The Boy with the Thorn in His Side went to 27, Big Mouth went to 26. Okay, now since then, Panic and Ask have gone to 11 and 14, and Shoplifters, of course, was 12 last week and is 12 again this week. Incidentally, congratulations to the Irish charts this week, from number 25 to number 7 this week.
Yes, we heard. That's wonderful news.
So, like, I mean, were you whinging? And if so, were you saying, look, at this stage of the game, we're so big, we're too big for Rough Trade, they're not doing enough for us?
Yes.
Is that what it was, really?
That's what it is, really. That's what it is. And we would ask for promotion. When we release a single, we would ask that it be promoted, and Rough Trade would say no, and that would be construed as the Smiths whinging. But really, we had to wait until our 9th single until Rough Trade would allow us a fly poster on the street. They always said, no, we can't afford it, we can't afford to spend any money. Even after the release of the first album, which had gone in at number 2, they still said, no, we can't afford it. So, whinging because we feel that we're doing everything and Rough Trade do absolutely nothing. And that's always been the basis of our disruption.
Well then, from a different side of the Rough Trade thing, if you released the first single, Hand in Glove, in May 1983, and by the end of that year you were the king of the indie bands, if you like, do you find it a bit depressing, frankly, that you're still the king of the indie bands in 1987?
Well, in a way, yes, but in a way, not really. I mean, it was depressing when Hand in Glove was released and it immediately began to sell and had good reviews and had some degree of attention, and Rough Trade still insisted that it wasn't worthy of a 12-inch release, for instance. That was very depressing to me. And, but sometimes you can feel a bit trapped. But now we feel that in order to really become independent, to gain an independence that befits the status that we have to move. And it's not really deserting Rough Trade, it's just the fact that our contract has ended and we're going somewhere else. So it's not desertion. I mean, we can quite easily look back upon all the things that the Smiths have given Rough Trade, and they're things that they've never had. When we first came to Rough Trade, it was a bedroom in Blenheim Crescent in London, and now it's a huge, big office block, as you know. And we've given them 4 gold albums. We've given them a string of very respectable hit singles. Their profile has never been so high. But people don't really dwell upon these aspects. Detractors don't really dwell upon these aspects, including Rough Trade themselves.
Well, there are certain detractors who would go even further than that and say that the very fact that you've signed with EMI is a bit of a not-so-great one. Now, I'll tell you, like, one of the reasons that people would say that is that, for instance, the Smiths have always been a band who've aligned themselves to, how shall I put it, justice for people, say, on one level, right? Like, for instance, now just take the Meat is Murder album, right? Okay, now, you're outspoken against meat eaters to the point where you think that, for instance, you might even support the Animal Liberation Front. Now, how do you feel about the Animal Liberation Front?
Well, I understand what they do, because I find that if you protest in a very calm and very peaceful, gentle way, that people actually walk past you and don't listen. But sometimes, in order to get the point across, you have to smash a window, and you have to break into the labs and get the animals and so on. And ultimately, I mean, when you think of what the Animal Liberation are actually doing, just trying to save lives of animals who are trapped, I don't really understand anybody who could oppose that situation. To me, it's unthinkable. I mean, if you saw a cat trapped on the road, it had been run over, what would you do, go over it again? No, I think you'd get out and probably try and help it, or a dog. So why not where animals in laboratories are concerned? Why is that suddenly, well, let's think about that. Maybe that could be a crime to go in and get those animals.
Well, this is the point that's actually been in the Irish news a little bit lately, and like these people would, though, go as far as, say, putting an incendiary device at a butcher shop.
Right, but it's a butcher shop that every day of its life murders hundreds and hundreds of animals who don't want to be murdered, so, you know, maybe one dead butcher isn't such a great loss.
Essentially, I'm speaking like you're a guest, if you like, in a country which allows open-air coursing, and which last week in Clonmel, in County Tipperary, let some school children off to actually go to a coursing meeting to see hares and being torn apart by dogs for the sake of sport as the blood spurts up in the air, sort of thing, you know. So, it's not as though, it's just that, how extreme, if you say that you can understand them, does that mean that you would actively support them, say?
Oh, absolutely, totally, yes. I think it's the most admirable thing to support, really.
Well, then what about other causes, if you like, that you've gone? For instance, a lot of people said that when you used to wear the flowers in the back pocket of your trousers, that you would sort of empathise with the Greenham Common women.
Yes.
On sort of a gladioli being a symbol of whatever sort of thing.
Yes, of nature and of peace and of the world, and... Yes, I still endure. I feel to a large degree it's slipping away, and people are becoming bored with the nuclear issue, which is very sad in itself. But then, I mean, with so many nuclear plants just sprouting up all over the country, I feel really exasperated. I mean, sometimes I even feel, well, this is what the people deserve, really. So at the moment, I feel a little bit disillusioned with that issue and that question.
Well then, to go back to that thing I was saying about EMI, which started all this, for instance, if the Smiths and yourself in particular is very opposed to violence, mental or physical, against people, animals, blacks, whites or whatever, then there are those who will say if you join EMI Records, you're therefore joining Thorn EMI, and Thorn EMI make lots of big weapons that kill lots and lots of people.
Yes. And such people control shops like HMV and Virgin Records, where most of us living in big cities buy our records, and which Rough Trade and other independent record companies have to deal with. So in essence, it's all already been there, and just it's not as if we're really joining that situation. Everybody's in it now, and it's a mess and it's wrong. But the Smiths joining EMI isn't like endorsing it for practically the first time, or facing it rather for the first time. We wouldn't endorse it, but it's a problem that everybody has. Rough Trade have it. Other smaller independent record labels have it. They have to deal with people who are connected somehow with EMI. So it's not just a singular incident.
Well, Morrissey, there's an album coming out shortly, which is the Animal Liberation album. There's lots of people giving songs to that. Are the Smiths on that?
We wanted to be on it, but the record company in America said no, so we couldn't be on it, which is a shame. I don't know why they said no. I believe they feel that if anybody wants the track, they can go out and buy, the Meters Murder record. But I thought it was quite sad, really, that they said no.
But, like, they've said no. In the old days, if Rough Trade said no, you'd say, well, listen, we're the Smiths, so we say yes.
Right, but we're dealing with Sire Records in America who don't listen to anything that the Smiths request in any way. It's a very detached relationship we have in America.
Well, what about other causes or issues or whatever? Like, for instance, anti-apartheid gigs. Now, for instance, you did one of those. You've done a few of those.
Yes.
But, I mean, for instance, like, at your average anti-apartheid gig, what the Smiths might be, would it upset you in any way that even in a racial mixed area that 98% of the people would be white at those gigs?
No, that wouldn't upset me. I mean, it would upset me if nobody was there. And it would upset me if we did the gig and we did not raise any money for the cause. And when we played recently in London, we raised a phenomenal amount of money for the cause. So that's really the main issue as far as I can see. I mean, I don't really hold out much hope of any dramatic political awareness skirting its way across the hall into everybody's minds. I think that's a little bit optimistic. I mean, it was really a Smiths concert, and it began and ended as such. And we just handed the money over to a cause.
Well, there was one other one you did too, on the Red Wedge tour. You didn't do most of it, but you did do the last gig.
Yes.
Now, I get the impression you were quite reluctant to have done that.
Yes, very reluctant, really. I didn't really understand what was happening on stage. It all seemed a bit limp to me. Even though there were certain people involved whom I do admire, it did seem like a limp display. I didn't really see any smiling faces in the audience. I thought it was a little bit placid, really. So those were the reasons why we didn't get involved earlier. We did the last one just as a slip-in, slip-out gesture, really. Nothing overblown. And
is that slip-in, slip-out gesture means that would mean that you would support what Reg Wedge supposedly stands for? What exactly does Reg Wedge stand for?
Yes, well, that's a big question
vague.
I don't suppose people can answer. I mean, I never really hear any concrete statements or usable statements coming forth from the people who organise Red Wedge. I never really know what they're on about. I mean, the basis of the whole thing seems to be, if we're trying to bring political awareness to people who perhaps wouldn't really care that much, or political hope in this certain party, and if people must vote, well, they should go this way, which is fair enough. I mean, nothing inspires me there. Not really.
Okay, well, listen, I'm going to take a bit of music. I'm going to take the title track of the last album, The Queen is Dead.
Good.
That's the title track there of the most recent LP from the Smiths, and that's called The Queen is Dead, of course. And if you've just joined us, we're talking here on the programme to Morrissey.